Hello, and welcome to Revenge Diaries.
Oh, it was
Before
so
we begin,
funny.
don't forget to like this
I still
video
can't
and
believe she said
subscribe.
that.
We post real-life inspired stories that'll leave you speechless. Today's story was sent in by a viewer who wanted to stay anonymous. But what she shared? It's something too many people will relate to. It's about a mother who overheard her own daughter call her just a burden. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply picked up her bag and left something on the table that would change everything. This is the story of how silence became her strength, and how one forgotten woman reminded them all exactly who she was. Let's begin with part 1. I've always believed that love, real, unconditional love, was quiet. It didn't need to announce itself in grand gestures. It showed up in packed lunches, in folded laundry, in waiting outside school plays long after everyone else had left. And for most of my life, that's how I loved my daughter, Emily. But on that gray Tuesday morning, standing in her kitchen, I realized something I should have seen long ago. I was no longer her mother in her eyes. I was just a burden. The day had started simply enough. I'd come over to help, as usual. Emily had asked if I could look after the twins while she ran errands. I said yes, of course. I always said yes. I let myself in through the back door like I'd done 100 times. The house was quiet. The kids must have been napping. That's when I heard her. Emily's voice carried from the dining room, low but sharp. "She's just a burden, Jake. I can't breathe in my own house. She lingers like she owns the place. I didn't sign up for this when she moved in. She's not my responsibility." Jake. Her husband. I froze. The grocery bag slipped slightly in my hand. The edge of a cereal box poked into my side, but I barely noticed. Jake's voice followed. "You want me to say something?" There was a pause. Then her voice again, firmer. "Number just. I don't want her here. Not anymore." My legs refused to move. My ears, traitors that they were, kept listening, hoping, praying for some sort of redemption, a quick, "I didn't mean it," or "I'm just tired." But it never came. I stepped back, slowly and silently. My heart was loud in my chest, but my hands didn't tremble. I was too numb. I'd raised that girl, paid for her braces, stayed up nights during every fever, worked double shifts to afford her piano lessons. I sat in the front row of every recital, clapping louder than anyone. And now I was a burden? An unwanted shadow in the home I'd helped hold together? I placed the grocery bag quietly on the kitchen counter and stepped into the hallway. Emily and Jake were still in the other room. I didn't want them to see me, because I knew if she looked into my face right now, I might fall apart. Instead, I went upstairs. My room was small, just a guest bedroom with a twin bed and a dresser. I'd been staying here for a few months since my hip surgery. The doctor said no stairs for a while. Emily had offered, no, insisted, I recover here. She said she wanted to help, said it would be nice for the kids to have Grandma around. I believed her. I packed slowly, one bag, just what I needed. The picture of Emily as a baby? That came with me. The little drawing Corey made that said, "I love Grandma?" That too. But before I left, I did one more thing. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a sheet of paper from my purse, and wrote, not a letter of anger, not a guilt trip, just the truth. "Emily, I heard you today. I won't ask you to explain. I won't ask you to apologize. But I need you to know that I didn't come here to be a burden. I came because I thought I was needed. I won't stay where I'm not wanted. But before I go, I want to leave you this." I folded the paper and placed it under the edge of the fruit bowl. Next to it, I left a thin white envelope. Inside was a check, one that would cover her mortgage for the next 3 months. I had planned to surprise her with it at dinner. She'd mentioned money was tight, and I'd quietly taken some savings from the small pension Henry left me. I wanted to help. Even after what I heard, I still wanted to help. That's what hurt most. As I stepped out onto the porch, the wind stung my cheeks. I wasn't sure if it was the cold or the ache in my chest. No one called out. No one followed. I walked down the street with my bag and didn't look back. I didn't cry on the bus ride. Not when I asked the driver for a one-way ticket to the town I once called home. Not when I watched the landscape blur past the window. And not when the elderly man across from me offered a half smile that said, "I see your sadness, but I won't ask." Because sometimes silence is kinder than pity. My old friend, Sharon, lived just outside town in a weathered little cottage with yellow shutters and an overgrown garden. We hadn't seen each other in years, but when she opened the door, saw me standing there with just a duffel and my dignity, she didn't say a word, just wrapped her arms around me. "Your room's still got that old rocking chair," she whispered, rubbing my back. I stayed with Sharon for 2 days, just enough time to catch my breath. I helped in the garden, swept the floors, even made her favorite peach cobbler. She didn't press for details. She knew I'd talk when I was ready. And on the 3rd morning, I did. "She called me a burden," I said quietly, spooning sugar into my tea. "My own daughter?" Sharon's eyes softened, her lips pressing into a thin, heartbroken line. "She must have forgotten everything you carried for her." I nodded. "She doesn't see me anymore?" "Not really. I'm just extra weight in her perfect world." But Sharon leaned in and said something I wouldn't forget. "Then maybe it's time to remind her who lifted that world up in the first place." Later that week, I checked into a small inn on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine for now. And more importantly, it was quiet. For the first time in years, I woke up to my own rhythm. No requests, no errands, no one tossing passive-aggressive comments over coffee, just me, a notebook, and time. But back at Emily's house, the silence I left behind had begun to speak louder than anything I could have said. I know this because of the phone calls. At first, there were none. Then came the first voicemail. "Hey, Mom, just wondering where you are. The twins asked. Call me when you can." Then another. "Mom, it's been a couple of days. I saw the note. Can we talk?" Then came Jake. "Listen, whatever Emily said, she didn't mean it. She was tired, stressed. You know how she gets." But I stayed quiet because I had nothing left to explain. What they didn't know, what no one in that house knew, was that the quiet woman who folded their laundry and swept their floors was far more than the shadow they thought she'd become. I had worked 2 jobs most of my life. Saved every penny. I wasn't rich, but I was steady, reliable. And a year ago, I'd sold my late husband's land to a developer and made more than I ever expected. I never told Emily, not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted her to love me without thinking about my wallet. But that check I'd left under the fruit bowl, that was just a taste of what I could have done. And now, I was rethinking everything. That night, I sat in the small inn's dining hall, scribbling in my notebook. I wrote a list titled, "Things I Still Want to Do." Travel to Maine in the fall. Learn to use watercolor paints. Visit Corey's school play, if I'm ever invited again. Start a fund for women like me. Because there were so many of us. Mothers, grandmothers, caretakers who gave our lives to our families, only to be pushed aside the moment we became inconvenient. But the truth was, we didn't need to fade. We just needed to redirect. A week passed before I got the text. Emily, I found the check. I don't understand why you did that after what I said. But I want to understand. Can we meet? It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in the wall. Still, I didn't reply. Not yet. She needed more than just a conversation. She needed a moment she'd never forget. And so, I made a quiet plan. One that didn't involve yelling or revenge or grand declarations. Just a message, a reminder of who I was. The next day, I called my lawyer. His name was Michael, a quiet, brilliant man who'd handled Henry's estate and helped me manage the sale of the land. I want to make an update to my will, I said. And I need something hand-delivered. He didn't ask questions. He just said, of course. While Emily sat in her kitchen, wondering where I'd gone, something was already on its way. A sleek white envelope, delivered by courier, sealed with embossed initials. Inside, a letter and a document. Simple, direct, and undeniable. Because sometimes the loudest statements don't need to be spoken at all. 3 days passed since I'd sent the envelope. 3 long, aching days of silence. Part of me expected Emily to call the moment the courier left her doorstep. But no. The stillness stretched on, and in that silence, I found a strange sense of peace. I wasn't waiting for her anymore. I wasn't hoping she'd say the right thing. I was reclaiming the parts of me that had been left on hold for years. On the morning of the 4th day, my phone finally rang. It was Emily. Her voice sounded thin, distant, almost like she was calling from another lifetime. Mom, I got your letter. And the documents. I don't know what to say. I didn't speak. Not yet. I wanted her to feel the weight of her own words, so she kept talking. I never thought I'd be that person, that daughter. I was angry that day, tired, overwhelmed. But what I said, that wasn't fair. You didn't deserve it. Still, I said nothing. Let her keep going. I read the letter twice. You always wrote better than you spoke. I remember that about you. That made my throat tighten. She paused, then added softly. I didn't know you had done all that for us. I didn't know how much you'd saved. I didn't even know about the land. There it was. The real thing she'd discovered. That the mother she dismissed as a burden had quietly built a legacy of her own. The truth is, the letter I left behind wasn't dramatic. It simply explained where I had gone, why I left, and what I would no longer allow in my life. But more importantly, it included a legal note from my attorney, informing her that while she had been included in my estate as a beneficiary, that clause had now been removed. Not out of punishment, but out of clarity. You called me a burden? I wrote. So I am relieving you of that weight, permanently. Emily finally asked the question I knew was coming. Can we talk? In person? I said yes, not for closure, not for reconciliation, but because I deserved to look her in the eye and not flinch. We met at the small cafe on the edge of town, the one with the chipped teacups and checkered napkins, the same one where I used to bring her for a cupcake after dentist visits when she was little. She was already there when I arrived, fidgeting with her phone. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't rush to her. I didn't offer my hand. I simply sat. Let her speak first. I don't have excuses, she began, but I do have regrets. I see now that I didn't just hurt you that day. I erased everything you've done to keep us together. I took a slow sip of my tea and met her gaze. My entire life, I said, voice even. I thought being quiet was the same as being kind, that if I just kept helping, kept giving, I'd never be seen as a burden. Turns out, even that wasn't enough. Emily wiped her cheek. I was wrong. About everything. I nodded. Yes, you were. We didn't hug. We didn't cry in each other's arms. It wasn't that kind of moment, because forgiveness isn't always soft. Sometimes it's sharp, clean, necessary. Sometimes it's a boundary, not a bridge. I told her I wasn't coming back. I told her I still loved her, that I'd always be her mother. But I would no longer stay in a house where I wasn't wanted. And then I told her the most important part. Respect isn't owed because of blood. It's earned. And you'll need to earn it again, if you want me in your life. After we parted, I didn't look back. There was no dramatic music playing, no slow-motion walk into the sunset, just the sound of gravel under my shoes and the feeling that for the first time in years, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward myself. Back at the inn that evening, I opened the small wooden box I kept locked in my suitcase. Inside were photos. Henry in his younger days, Emily as a child, even the twins with birthday cakes smeared on their faces. I smiled. Because those memories, they were mine, and no careless comment or cold stare could ever take them away. I spent the next few days researching properties. Nothing big, just a small place with a garden, maybe a porch swing. A place to breathe, a place to remember that my story didn't end with someone else's rejection. On the following weekend, I received a letter, handwritten, from Emily. No lawyers, no formalities, just her handwriting, messy, familiar, desperate. She wrote about missing my voice in the kitchen, about the way the twins kept asking when I'd come back, about the night she sat in my old room and realized the only thing more painful than losing me was realizing she'd pushed me away. She ended it simply. I don't deserve a second chance, but if you ever decide to give me one, I'll be ready. I folded the letter gently and placed it in the box with the others. Maybe one day I'd go back. Maybe I wouldn't. But for now, I had one more part of my story left to write. Spring came quietly. Birdsong drifted through the open window of my new little house, where the garden was finally beginning to bloom. I stood barefoot on the wooden porch, hands curled, around a warm mug of tea, watching the sun spill across the grass. It wasn't grand, it wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Everything in that home, from the creaky floorboards to the mismatched chairs, was chosen by me, for me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just somebody's mother or grandmother or guest. I was me again. Emily hadn't written again, not yet, and I hadn't reached out either. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't ready to return to the same pattern, the one where I quietly folded myself into other people's expectations. The silence between us wasn't cold, it was respectful. It gave her space to reflect, and it gave me space to heal. One afternoon, while trimming roses in the yard, I heard a familiar voice from behind the gate. "Grandma?" I turned. Corey stood there, my grandson, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his eyes hesitant but hopeful. My breath caught. He was taller now, his face a little more grown up than I remembered, but he still had that dimple in his cheek, the one that appeared when he smiled, even shyly. I opened the gate. He stepped in slowly, as if unsure whether he was welcome. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," he said. I found your address in one of her drawers. I nodded gently and led him to the porch swing. We sat in quiet for a moment before he spoke again. She misses you. We all do. I looked at him. And do you? He hesitated, then nodded. A lot. He told me everything. How the house felt different without me. How dinner was quieter. How even Jake had admitted they had treated me unfairly. Corey said Emily cried after receiving my letter. That she carried it around for days, reading it over and over like a confession. She's trying to be better, he whispered. I think she just didn't know how much she needed you until you were gone. I reached over and gently patted his hand. I needed to be gone, I said, not to punish her, but to remember who I was. He looked confused, so I explained. When people forget your worth, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is leave, not to hurt them, but to honor yourself. He didn't say much after that, but before he left, he hugged me tighter than he ever had before. A week later, I got a letter. Not from Emily, from Corey. It had drawings of my garden, a story about school, and a simple line at the bottom. You're not a burden, you're my hero. I cried that day, not because of the past, but because of hope. Time passed. I joined a local women's group at the library, started painting with watercolors, even taught a few neighborhood kids how to bake pie crust from scratch. It was quiet, peaceful. But every so often, I'd get a new card, or a small box of cookies from the twins, or a message from Emily. Soft, remorseful attempts to rebuild, and I let them come. Slowly, gently, on my terms. One Saturday morning, nearly a year since I had walked out of that kitchen with nothing but my dignity and a letter, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Emily stepped out. No makeup, no grand gestures. Just a nervous woman holding a bouquet of daisies, the ones she used to pick from our old backyard as a child. She stood at the base of my porch and looked up. I don't expect anything, she said. I just wanted to say, thank you. For walking away, for making me wake up. I stepped down slowly and looked her in the eye. It wasn't easy. She nodded. I know. I took the flowers and I opened the door. Not because I was ready to forget, but because I was ready to begin again. Differently. This time, with boundaries. With love that stood up for itself. With respect that wasn't begged for, but earned. As we sat on my couch and sipped tea, just like old times, but better, Emily looked around and smiled softly. You did all this yourself? I smiled. Yes. You've always been stronger than I gave you credit for. I nodded. You're finally seeing me. She took a deep breath, held my hand, and whispered, I don't deserve this, but I'm glad you didn't let me break you. I squeezed her hand gently. No one can break me unless I let them, and I'm done letting.